Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us, Mandela Mining Precinct. My name is Alexandra Lugagne, and I work for a company called RIIS. We are the modernization partners for the Minerals Council. So over the next few minutes, I'm just going to speak a little bit about a project and some outcomes we had over last year in 2020, which we did focusing on the future of skills. Let me just proceed to the next slide. So just by way of context, the mine of the future, as everyone knows, is likely to utilize more advanced forms of technology. Even if it's not becoming mechanized, advances in many different areas such as Internet of Things or artificial intelligence will introduce new kinds of technology into the mining operations. To ensure that people are best able to use this technology, a forward-looking view is needed to map out and understand the future of mining skills in a way that is detailed and specific to mining rather than just generic skills of the future. Understanding how this can be of benefit to both workers and the company itself will enable changes in learning as well as learning delivery, and then ultimately help ensure that we have the skills of the future to remain globally competitive and productive. To this end, the Minerals Council has been on a long-term project to develop a reskilling and an upskilling framework and strategy to assist mining companies in achieving a just transition into the fourth industrial revolution, taking into account many different technological environments across mining methods. Just by way of context, the scope of this specific phase of 2020 was designed to complement other skills research projects such as SATCAP, which I'm sure we'll have a chance to also hear about in the symposium. If I proceed to the next step, I just want to double click a bit on the approach we took in 2020. And so over the last year, the project tested a three-phased approach and methodology, which assessed modernization impact on the skills specifically of the rock drill operator role. So if I talk a little bit more about the three phases, the first phase being the baseline to understand the as-is skills. This was composed of three main items. The first one was the skills baselining framework. So we applied an analytical hierarchy process to a globally benchmarked workforce skills breakdown. After that, we looked at the component of prioritization. So the rock drill operator, or RDO, was identified as the pilot occupation for the study, as it is the fourth largest employer in the mining industry. In the next slide, I'm just going to speak a bit more about that component. And then within the first phase, we also looked at baselining. So what that composes of two main items. First of all, we conducted expert interviews to identify the key activities and tasks for the rock drill operator occupation. And after that, we leveraged the expert insights to develop the baseline skills profile, something which you can see on the top right-hand side of the slide, for the rock drill operator occupation. It's that radar graph on the top right. If we look at the second phase, this consisted of mapping the skills of the future of mining and making impact studies. So we conducted expert interviews, studies, and site visits to understand the key skills that would be demanded in modernized context of the RDO occupation. We focused on where modernized technology has already been implemented, enhancing or improving the rock drill operators' daily activities. The impact assessment was achieved by looking at 5 separate case studies where different types of technology have been introduced in both conventional mines with the rock drill operator and mechanized mines in the similar or equivalent drill rig operator role. I'll also touch a little bit more on that in the next slide. In terms of the third phase, it looked at the future skills development. So taking into account the findings and the implications from these impact studies, 2 things were looked at. The first one being the future pathways, which meant identifying pathways to future scenarios based on outcomes of vulnerability assessment versus the future skills mapping. And then pathway transitioning strategies. So defining high-level strategies for transitioning vulnerable roles into high absorption opportunities in mining, out of mining, and adjacent industries. Let's delve a bit into the key findings, but I just want to touch back on the RDO role as the prioritized pilot for this initial study. The reasons included the significant amount of RDOs that are employed in the industry, according to 2019 estimates of almost 10% of the total workforce, and the fact that mining at its core revolves around drilling to enable blasting. So in order to understand possible skills transitions as mining methods evolve, we also looked at the equivalent drill rig operator role in a mechanized mining environment as a possible transition scenario, and we'll speak a bit about that as well. If you look at the graphic to the right-hand side, you can see that ratings across the various skills families for each of the case studies were superimposed and compared, and they show a few clear trends. Across the different case studies, there is a trend towards lower requirement for physical strength as machinery is modernized, regardless of the mining method. And there is an increased emphasis on digital skills, including data capturing requirements and increased remote working modalities due to autonomous or remotely operated drilling systems. That's especially visible in the red sections, which are linked to the drill rig operator roles. If we look a little bit further around the implications of these skills shifts, it's just noting that the trends and modernization effect vary slightly depending on the environment in which technology was observed, meaning conventional or mechanized mine. In conventional mines, a few key components are worth discussing. The first one, despite the efficiency introduced by modernized rock drill operator equipment, there was minimal impact to workforce capacity requirements, as the modernized drilling equipment still requires a 1-to-1 drill-to-drill ratio. The shift in skills composition within the rock drill operator conventional mine environment moves away from physical strength towards soft skills and transferable skills, and provides an opportunity for a more inclusive environment in the rock drill operator role, whether we're talking gender or accessibility. If we look at the mechanized mine, with the core drilling role moving from the rock drill operator to the drill rig operator, the main modernization effects included, just like with the modernized rock drill operator, requirements for physical strength were reduced through the introduction of new technology, which allows the equipment to bear the load of the mechanical efforts required to drill the rock. The emphasis on physical skills becomes increasingly relevant in the mechanized environments due to the introduction of digital interfaces to operate the machinery further away from the rock, whether it be completely remotely or at a few meters away. So if we look at these implications, the transition options that were identified were 4 main ones. Let's first look at within the conventional mines. There are 2 components. Continuous upskilling was identified as a high potential intervention with the help of original equipment manufacturers as equipment evolved. And second of all, cross-skill strategy to support the rock drill operator to operate or function in more diverse roles, which would combine different responsibilities. This would foresee new ways of working within the traditional technical context. If we look at the mechanized mines, the strategies identified were 2 main ones. The first one being agile reskilling, which would leverage the RDO core skills for use in a different and mechanized environment. And then the second one being the redeployment of rock drill operators into adjacent industries or alternative roles in the mining sector, as well as beyond the mine gate. So if we drill down on these 4 transition strategies, potential interventions were identified according to each. Within the upskilling, the continuous upskilling of RDOs, one of the potential interventions discussed was the rebaselining of the rock drill operator certification standards, which would accommodate for skills linked varying technologies across the industry. This is, for example, something that can be seen in one of the work packages that was undertaken by SATCAP, focusing on the RDO. This would then allow the rock drill operator to stay within conventional mine operations, whether it be by an upskill rock drill operator role or a cross-skilled, enriched, or enlarged rock drill operator role. for example, managerial positions, plant and machine operator roles, equipment maintenance, and so forth. Then if we look at the cross-skilling strategy, it could include potential interventions such as job enrichment, and enlargement strategies that allow the Rockwell operator to have access to broader career pathways. This would allow the RDO to move beyond the mine gate, whether it be reskill RDO job as installation, maintenance, and repairs. And if we look at the agile reskilling strategy, there would be potential to put in interventions for the rapid reskilling of the RDO for roles in a mechanized mining environment. So this would allow the RDO to be reskilled towards mechanized drill rig operator, driver, or other type of similar roles. And then finally, if we look at redeployment, the intervention that was considered was how to put in place programs for reskilling of RDOs into roles of adjacent industries. So this could include, for example, roles in installation, maintenance, and repairs, construction, manufacturing, plumbing, etc. So I think we're going to wrap up here, given that this was the extent of some of the insights derived out of the project in 2020, but noting that the intention would be to consider a similar framework for other occupations that are relevant in the industry.